SpongeBob has an impressive number of episodes that defy all logic, and it's so absurd that you can't help but love it. Today we'll talk about some of those episodes in which we think that maybe, just maybe, Squidward deserves something better. Because, of course, what better person can have moments of glory and peace? Today we're talking about The Unknown Artist, an episode that starts with Squidward wanting to teach art and ends with a janitor taking all the credit for an accidental masterpiece. Because, of course, what could possibly go wrong? Spoiler, everything. We open with Squidward, who is absolutely convinced that he is the Picasso of Bikini Bottom. Yes, that same Squidward who can't even play the clarinet without making the entire neighborhood suffer. But it doesn't matter because he's also an art teacher now. A profession that, by the way, gives him the perfect excuse to be more insufferable than ever.
What a marvelous opportunity for the people of Bikini Bottom. Bring me your huddled masses of bored housewives, and I will shape them in my image.
Aha! Because what a housewife really needs is to become another Squidward. That idea sounds about as appealing as a day at the Krusty Krab's office, and you'll also go down in history as the guy who loses his mind every time someone knocks on your door. Don't worry, we'll see that later. And now we get to the disaster at hand. Squidward's students are here to learn art. In fact, they don't even know why they're here. Everyone leaves quickly when they find out this isn't a cooking class. Everyone except, yep, you guessed it. And this is where the real chaos begins. Because if there's one thing we need in the episode, it's for SpongeBob to bring out the worst in Squidward. But wait, this is just the beginning.
If I'm lucky, some of Mr. Tentacles' talent may rub off on me.
If I'm lucky, Mr. Talent will rub his tentacles on my art.
And so, in less than a minute, Squidward explains to him that he's better at everything, as if it were a dictation class, a true motto as a teacher, although that's a little weird. After a few artistic exercises, SpongeBob shows his hidden talent. He can draw perfect circles, and not only that, but he can also sculpt perfect sculptures that would make Michelangelo cry. The opposite of Squidward, who does everything absolutely wrong. A circle and a sculpture that was never born, but was just chiseled and turned to ashes. And since he's not a jealous person, he clearly let it go.
It's beautiful. This isn't a sculpture. You gotta go by the book. Follow the rules. Besides, you got the nose wrong. There. Now it's art.
Because, of course, Squidward's nose is the universal measure of quality art. Put it on the Mona Lisa right now. Bob is emotionally devastated, so he walks away with his head down as if his shoulders were going to fall apart. Just then, a rather elegant man arrives and with a single slam of the door, sends our poor Sponge to the Bikini Bottom dumpster. Squidward doesn't want to continue the lesson, so he doesn't give it much importance, although he should.
Oh, I beg your pardon, but I've forgotten my manners. My name is Monty P. Moneybags.
But what a great coincidence that this art collector happens to be in these parts looking for something new to exhibit in his museum. So, our amazing artist decides to show him his most recent creations, a rather peculiar sculpture and a slightly different self-portrait.
I don't think that will fit in with the other pieces in my collection.
Why not?
Because it's an art collection!
How about this one? I call it bold and brash.
More like belongs in the trash!
And not even a second goes by when the janitor comes by with the trash and throws the painting in the trash can. There is not much to say about this. Monty gets bored quickly, but even I don't like to look at those Squidward paintings. Well, I'm lying, not like that either, but it should improve. And just as Monty decides to leave, he's surprised by the impressive sculpture made by our dear Sponge. A born artist, if you ask me. The collector is desperate to find out who is responsible for such a masterpiece.
It's me, I'm responsible.
And of course, Squidward takes the credit because, well, lying is second nature to him. But this moment of glory doesn't last long because in an act worthy of a comedy of errors, the sculpture is decapitated when they try to remove it from the building. Desperate to fix his mess, Squidward seeks out SpongeBob, who is now living in a dumpster, depressed, and gets him to come back to the studio. The big difference is that SpongeBob's self-esteem is no longer the same and he only thinks about following everything that is in the book. So everything that was excellent is a disaster. The circle is deformed, the paper figure no longer comes out and the sculpture turns to ashes. This drives Squidward into a fit of maniac madness, where he smashes marble stones everywhere. Just when he finishes, the collector returns to the studio.
I'm here for the... What the? Who is responsible for this?
As of now, it's his responsibility. Good day to you, sir!
Our beloved frustrated artist is finally able to make a perfect sculpture, made with much anger and misgiving, but so too does Squidward's dream end, with the credit and fame going to the janitor. Honestly, this episode is a real journey, but at least it leaves us with a clear moral. No matter how good you are, there will always be a Squidward trying to ruin it. The Unknown Artist is a reminder that Squidward's arrogance knows no bounds and that SpongeBob, though naive, is a genius in his own way. Was it absurd? Absolutely. Iconic? Definitely. But wait, because what's next is just as crazy. Speaking of crazy moments, the next episode takes us to a whole new level of insanity. Get ready for a classic from the season 1, pizza delivery, because who needs common sense when you've got pizza, a rock and Squidward having the worst day of his life. We begin at the Krusty Krab, that place where anything can happen, and Mr. Krabs always finds creative ways to exploit his employees. The restaurant is now closed, but of course, it's never too late for a new business, right? Pizza delivery, because nothing says burger joint like a magical pizza that appears out of nowhere. There is Squidward, ready to go home after a long day of dealing with SpongeBob, but the universe has other plans. A customer calls, and though Squidward tries to hang up, Mr. Krabs has better ideas as he accepts the order and sends Squidward on his amazing journey home.
Can't you just get SpongeBob to do it?
Great idea! Take him with you.
That's not what I had in mind.
And so, not only does Squidward lose his night off, but he also has to take SpongeBob, his favorite neighbor, with him. Poor Squidward, we already know he didn't sign up for this. Bob, excited as ever, takes over the wheel under pressure from Squidward, and of course, we all know this can't end well. Spoiler, it doesn't. Well, they end up in the middle of nowhere because our Sponge, not a big favorite at this point, she didn't know how to stop in reverse and kept going. Squidward is worried about everything like the fuel and the fact that they don't know where they are standing, but Bob brings up the fact that a pizza can get cold because that's the most important thing, obviously.
And the pizza's cold. Oh, the pizza's cold, not the pizza. Oh, how can it get any worse?
And so begins their epic journey on foot. SpongeBob sings about pizza as if it's the greatest culinary creation in history, while Squidward just wants to be swallowed up by a whirlpool, literally.
Will you let go of that stupid pizza already?
I can't, it's for the customer.
Who cares about the customer?
I do.
Well, I don't.
This is where we learn Bob's true philosophy. It doesn't matter if you're starving or if a truck is about to hit you. Pizza comes first. Priorities, people, priorities. After a sandstorm, a whirlwind and more complaints from Squidward, Bob finds a rock covered in moss. But of course, it's not just any rock. It's a pioneer rock because apparently pioneers used to travel around in these things. Totally logical, right? After all, the moss side is supposed to be where civilization is. And as expected, Squidward decides to do the opposite because admitting that Bob is right would be too much to ask. Spoiler again, Bob was right. They keep walking for hours until their bodies can't take it anymore and they collapse underground, their stomachs rumbling with hunger. Squidward just wants something to eat, so Bob gives him a coral, but we know that doesn't solve it.
Give me the pizza.
Wait, I remember now, it was coral.
Give it to me.
No, we promised it's for the customer.
But what does the customer matter at this point? He hasn't been walking for hours without eating anything, so Squidward tries to persuade Bob, lying to him to make sure the pizza arrives safely at its destination. He begins to go over all the ingredients while looking at it longingly, and our Sponge is carried away by the aromas that this heavenly food gives off. But he soon realizes this and runs away so that Squidward can't catch him. A few seconds pass and the artist and musician get tired and stops because he's not good at athletics either. At that moment, Bob notices that there is another pioneer rock, but this one is giant. He climbs it and advances until he steps on Squidward, while he gives one of his long speeches about why he is always right. Finally, they arrive at the client's house. But as if that wasn't enough drama, he complains that he didn't get his drink, a drink he didn't even order, and to top it up, he throws the pizza in Bob's face. This man clearly doesn't understand the effort it takes to cross a desert to deliver a pizza, but don't worry, because here comes Squidward's moment of heroism.
Another one? Look, I told you, little friend, I ain't paying for that!
Well, this one's on the...
An act of justice that we all applaud. The best moment? When he returns and lies to Bob into believing that everything went well, and so Squidward, the anti-hero we didn't know we needed, becomes the true MVP of the episode. Pizza delivery is a roller coaster of madness, where Bob shows us that devotion to the customer can take you to unsuspected extremes, and Squidward reminds us that sometimes you just have to do the right thing your way. I wish I could say that there were few episodes where Squidward deserved better, but no, because if you thought a magic pizza was rare, wait until you see what happens in The Return of Squidward. Get ready for a roller coaster of lies, culinary chaos, and of course, gratuitous humiliation. Here we go. It all begins at a Krusty Krab, where Squidward, as always, is at his breaking point, and frankly, who can blame him? If I had to work with SpongeBob every day, I'd be counting down the seconds until I got out of there too, literally.
I'm done with my shift, Mr. Krabs. And let me just say, there will come a day when I will make something of my life, and I will never have to set foot in this grease trap again!
After receiving Mr. Krabs' loving reminder that he must come back tomorrow, Squidward leaves work only to be confronted by his worst nightmare. Squidward dapper, surrounded by admirers and bragging about his luxurious life, because of course, humility has never been the strong point of this character.
Just succeeding in everything you failed in.
What a nice guy, huh? Here we might think that Squidward would cower and walk away, but no, he decides to try to outdo the king of snobbery.
Don't lie. Lying always makes it worse. I own a 5-star restaurant.
Squidward, I had no idea you were such a success.
Because of course, what could go wrong apart from everything? Obviously, now Calamarino wants to see the luxurious restaurant with all his friends. With time against him and his dignity hanging in the balance, Squidward races back to Krusty Krab to beg for Mr. Krabs' help, and this is when the episode starts to escalate to the level of a plan too elaborate to feel spectacular.
Squilliam? That guy who made millions doing what you wish you could do?
Don't rub it in.
Why didn't you tell me? We'll take him to the cleaners.
Thanks for that emotional boost, Mr. Krabs. I'm sure that helps. But surprisingly, he goes along with the plan, and Squidward assigns roles. Patrick will be the receptionist, Mr. Krab will cook, and SpongeBob will be the waiter. It all seems more or less the same. Less controlled until we remember that this is SpongeBob controlled. Bob absolutely panics over the how to be a waiter in 20 minutes manual, and honestly, I would have a meltdown too if I had to memorize that much in such a short amount of time. And then there is Patrick, who fights with a cold rack because, well, it's Patrick. Finally, the moment of truth arrives. Squidward and his entourage enter the restaurant ready to make fun of Squidward. But what if is a place more elegant than Bikini Bottom has ever seen? Even Squidward seems surprised by how everything turned out so perfect so far.
How did you do all this?
It was easy, once I cleared my mind.
Because clearly the key to culinary success is absolute zen. Take note, aspiring chefs. However, not everything is as it seems. SpongeBob has tied up Mr. Krabs and Patrick in the utility room, but minor details, right? Just when everything seems to be going well, SpongeBob panics when Squidward asks him his name. In an attempt to remember, the voices in his head go haywire, and he eventually decides to throw a jug of water at Squidward because, yes, that is the logical solution. And as expected, everything falls apart. The diners flee in a stampede. Mr. Krabs presents an appetizer that looks like something out of a horror movie, and Squidward stands paralyzed as his lie ends in absolute disaster. In a moment of absolute sincerity, Squidward breaks down and admits that he's nothing more than a cashier. But then, plot twist, Squidward also confesses that he lied and that he doesn't have a luxurious life either. Could we be witnessing a moment of humility and connection between these two? Of course not. It turns out Squidward was making it all up. Again, and to top it all off, he mocks Squidward while Mr. Krabs plays his tiny violin. And so ends this monumental mess of lies, chaos and shattered egos. If this episode teaches us anything, it's that lying won't get you anywhere, especially if you work at a Krusty Krab. But let's continue watching other episodes where poor Squidward didn't deserve to be mistreated, and boy does he deserve to be, but this time physically. We continue with one of those episodes that, although hilarious, leaves us wondering, why am I watching this? And why am I enjoying it so much? I present to you The Two Faces of Squidward, an episode that mixes superficiality, chaos, and the most ridiculous glow-up in the history of Bikini Bottom. It all starts out like any other day at a Krusty Krab, Squidward hating his life, the usual stuff. Our beloved cephalopod is at a checkout, serving customers while his dreams of being a great artist are crumbling in real time. Internally, he's regretting every life decision that led him to this point. But you know what makes all this worse? Yes, SpongeBob and Patrick singing in the kitchen. Because of course, what you need in a toxic work environment is not silence and respect. It's an improvised musical duo that repeats Crab Burger ad infinitum. Squidward is always the beacon of patience, but no matter how much he yells, Bob and Patrick just won't shut up. To be honest, I wouldn't either if I could annoy my neighbor that successfully. And then the incident happens. Squidward, already on the verge of a nervous breakdown, storms up to the kitchen, but just then, bam! Door in his face, courtesy of SpongeBob. Cut to Squidward with his hand over his face because it feels like his face is going to melt. Cut B, the classical hospital scene. Squidward is out of action and Bob is, as always, nervous and full of remorse. The doctor tries to explain the situation, but Bob, in his external anxiety, doesn't even let him finish a sentence until he finally makes him understand that he must wait 2 weeks. And after that time passed, the worried yellow sponge who lives in the pineapple returns to the hospital with flowers in his hand and all the energy of someone who is clearly not ready to face the consequences of his action. Squidward, completely bandaged, can't even move, but that doesn't stop Bob from trying to make things even more complicated. And then it happens. Boom! Squidward is now the aquatic equivalent of a Hollywood star. Handsome. No, not just handsome. Ridiculously handsome. And if you think I'm exaggerating, just wait because the episode exaggerates too. When Squidward walks the streets, miracles happen. A blind man getting his sight back, sure. A flying fish, why not? This is Bikini Bottom, where logic goes to die.
I better go greet the commoners.
Commoners, this guy has gone from being a misunderstood artist to the king of ego. And guess what? The crowd loves him, so much so they literally harass him in his own home. Squidward tries to relax with a bubble bath. A moment of peace, right? Nope, his bathroom turns into a fan meeting. People coming out of the toilet, out of the windows, even the bathtub. So without a doubt, Squidward is in a bubble bath. After thinking about it for a long time, he flies out the window to SpongeBob's house.
You gonna help me? They stole my bubble bath. Public life ain't all it's cracked up to be. I want my old life back.
There it is, the classic, I want my old life back. What always happens when a character gets what they want but can't handle it, at least it's consistent. And Bob, always as helpful as a fork in soup, tries to help out by being an ugliness shield. Spoiler alert, it doesn't work. So Squidward takes the more logical route, asking Bob to hit him with a Krusty Krab door again. Bob hits him and hits him and hits him, and guess what? He gets cuter. This episode is basically a metaphor for beat him until he shines. Finally, a flying shoe because of course, why not? Delivers the coup de grace, but Bob pushes it away so it doesn't hit him. And since he's not only physically more handsome, but also his movements, each stumble seemed like a delicate ballet step, until finally he collides with a column and returns to being the ugly, bitter Squidward that we all know. Just like that, all of Bikini Bottom leaves disappointed, and so this absurd odyssey ends. Squidward regains his peace, Mr. Krabs loses his customers, and we win an episode we'll probably never forget. Though we might wish we did. But wait, because if you think this was ridiculous, brace yourself. The next episode provides that in Bikini Bottom, there's always room for more craziness. Let's explore one of those episodes that, while memorable, also leaves us scratching our heads. Accidents will happen. get ready for a ride filled with drama, over-the-top drama, and of course, Squidward being as Squidward as possible. As always, the episode begins with our beloved Krusty Krab opening his doors. SpongeBob is happy, looking up Krabby Patties like it's his purpose in life. In fact, it seems like everyone he meets carries a little piece of his soul, because who else would work so hard without getting tired? Meanwhile, where's Squidward? Serving customers? Being helpful? Of course not. So Mr. Krabs is interrupted by a customer who, quite rightly, wonders who should be serving. And this is where the big question arises. Where is Squidward? Because if he's not behind the cash register, he's probably doing something completely unproductive. And Mr. Krabs, as usual, is quick to despair. But don't worry, because we soon discover that Squidward, at his most apathetic, is exactly where you'd expect to find him. In the stockroom, resting on a shelf full of burgers. Yeah, burgers, because in the Bikini Bottom universe, a shelf full of bread is apparently the perfect place to relax. Honestly, who needs a comfy chair or, I don't know, a couch, when you can just lay down on greasy food in the middle of the floor? There really are no limits to Squidward's creativity when it comes to avoiding doing his job. And this is where the chaos magic begins. The shelf, which up until that point seemed like a reliable structure, can no longer hold and collapses, falling on Squidward. His reaction? Dramatic as always, is as if he were starring in an epic soap opera with his ankle seriously injured and his life hanging by a thread. Because of course, if there's one thing Squidward knows how to do, it's turn any small inconvenience into a tragedy of disproportionate proportions. But of course, Squidward's drama is only half the story. On the other hand, we have Mr. Krabs, who, in a completely predictable move, is more concerned about his precious burgers than the health of his employee. It's not that he doesn't care about Squidward, well, he doesn't care at all, really, but how can he focus on the health of his staff when his business is at stake? Those burgers need to be taken care of immediately, even if it means leaving Squidward lying on the floor. And Squidward, true to form, doesn't let this opportunity to take advantage of the situation pass him by. Because if there's one thing Squidward knows how to do well, it's complain. And he does it with such mastery that if there were a prize for exaggerating pain and injuries, he'd win it year after year. Each complaint is a work of art. Ah, my ankle, he cries. Ah, my ankle, he cries, as if the world would stop because of his suffering. The man knows how to steal the show, even at a cost of credibility.
As if working here wasn't bad enough. But now I've been injured on the job.
Yes, Squidward, because working at the Krusty Krab isn't torture enough, now you have an excuse to complain and make a spectacle of it all. But best of all, Bob reminds Mr. Krabs of the union workers' sanction. Mr. Krabs responds, panic, because what business owner would want to deal with that? And this is where the episode really goes off the rails. A desperate Mr. Krabs indulges Squidward's every whim. Fluffy pillows, massages, candles, everything. He even turns the crab into a makeshift spa to squeeze the barnacles off his back. This is the point where you wonder if Mr. Krabs has any limit or if he really will do whatever it takes to avoid a fine. Spoiler, he will do whatever it takes. His only goal is to not face the consequences of not following the rules, no matter how absurd what he has to do to avoid it. And just when you thought things couldn't get any more ridiculous, the union manager arrives. Why? Because SpongeBob, in his eagerness to do the right thing, called him in to investigate the accident. Sure, SpongeBob just wanted to make sure everything was in order, but his good intentions only end up making things even more complicated. Squidward, as usual, becomes the center of attraction. His exaggerated grief causes even the union manager to begin to doubt his sincerity. But the real twist comes when Mr. Krabs decides to check the security cameras, and what does he discover? That Squidward's accident wasn't an accident at all. It turns out that he himself landed on a shelf full of burgers, causing his own fall, a minor disaster of his own making. In the end, Mr. Krabs regains control and decides that Squidward deserves a punishment. What? Squeezing the barnacles off his back, because what better way to close an episode than with a punishment as absurd as everything that came before? And with this, we close one of the episodes that best sums up Squidward's life, trying to take advantage of the situation and ending up paying the consequences, literally with his own hands. The episode is not only absurd, but it also leaves us thinking, does Squidward really deserve all this? Was it necessary to squeeze barnacles as punishment? Well, in SpongeBob's world, it seems so. The truth is that Squidward Squidward Tentacles is not only an incredibly relatable character, but also one of the most mistreated in Bikini Bottom, whether dealing with the incompetence of Bob and Patrick, the greed of Mr. Krabs, or simply wanting to enjoy some peace. He always ends up paying too high a price. Now that we've gone through this collection of comical injustices, it's time to ask ourselves who's next on the list. See you in the next video.